Hi class, so in this video we'll talk a little bit about um, selecting paths and moving paths around, grouping objects, and the Pathfinder tool, and joining paths. So I have a circle here right now, it's an ellipse, and you can just pull this from from your objects over here, perfect circle. You can just hold a shift key down. I want to use the star tool this time. Now if you just use the star tool and you just drag, you can get a star. You may have different points than I do, and how you can select those points, or you can tell it how many points you want the star to be, is that you would do is click just once into the work area, and here it will say how many points you want the star to be. So mine was 23. So let's say I want a 15-point star. That's what I would get. If I delete that and click it again, I can have a 45-point star, right? So you can. So I'm going to go back to a 20-point star. I want to change the color here. Outline, I'll make it none. So a couple of different things I want to focus on, which is on this one. Let me change the color to. So every time I want to change a fill, I have to click on this element. If I want to change a line, the outline, I click on this element. So I'm going to move these two down a bit, and I'm going to make the circle, the ellipse, a little bit bigger. So when you have two objects, you can select them, hold the shift key down, select the next object, and then you can kind of move them around, but they're not grouped together. So if you want to group something together, you can hold on the Command G or Control G, the two objects, and you group them, and they become one. You could also find that under Object Group, and it's grayed out because they're already grouped. So you can ungroup, and then you can move things around. So you will find it very useful in Illustrator to move things around. And they both have its own shape. Now if you did Photoshop, you'll know in Photoshop if you put two objects on top of each other, they stick to each other. Illustrator, they won't. You'll be able to move them around, have different layers if you want. But sometimes you do want, and I'm going to copy and paste this, so we have the two separate elements here. So, but sometimes you do want them to be attached to one another. So the Pathfinder tool, and you can find Pathfinder on the window Pathfinder. Pathfinder is a very interesting tool, a panel, because it allows you to take two objects or multiple objects and kind of combine them together or remove parts of the object together, and they sort of become one object. So it kind of finds the paths and then creates different paths. So you have different shape modes and different pathfinders. So the first one, it will combine the two elements. So let's say you clicked one, and let's see, overlapped this star with the ellipse, and you were to click this first shape mode. What you will have is one object now that has taken on a different shape of the two shapes together and become one object. So this now you can't ungroup this because it's not grouped. It's actually now one path. So sometimes that could be really useful because you want things to be kind of stuck together and you don't want to have to draw them. Say for instance you were drawing a bottle and you wanted the top of the bottle to be a rectangle shape, and you drew a rectangle and you wanted to kind of be one object, and let's say the top was, that's a really bad drawing. So remember my align tool, I can click all the elements, hold the shift key and click all my elements, and I can go to the align tool, which is up here, and I can align them, and it aligns centered, so they're all lined up in the center. Make sure it's aligned to artboard. Align to selection. Align to artboard means it will line up exactly in the middle of the artboard. So that's what happens. If I move it around and align to artboard, it's going to line up center in the artboard. There are three separate elements. I want to make them one. I select all elements, all three elements, go to the Pathfinder, and this first Pathfinder shape will group these three elements, now become one. Okay, I'm going to go back. So let's say I wanted to choose second element. I say I click the two. So it's important to make sure you're clicking both the ellipse and the star, or whatever two objects you might have. So this one is going to remove part of the star, right? So sometimes you want a really clean jagged line within another shape, and you don't want to have to draw it manually. You can use, and you can use any object. So let's say you were, doing a bite out of, like the apple, almost like, Apple's logo. You can definitely take a second ellipse. It doesn't matter what color it is, and you select both elements, and then you use this divide tool, and then you have a nice, clean, perfect circle. So in my last tutorial, I showed you how to use the pen tool to draw curves. Sometimes it's much easier just to use shapes, even when you're building a logo for like your logo project. You can, and we'll go more into this in the logo project, but you can take a font like a G. I'll make it really big. Make it like 100 point, maybe 200. And if it's too big, you have to open up the box. So I have a font. I can't make this because it's not a shape. So in typography, in Illustrator, you can change a font by going to Type, go Create Outlines, and now that font is no longer a font. You can't type in it anymore. It's now an outline. And I can make that white. And now they're two separate elements. But what if I wanted these two elements to be one element? Well, I can select both elements and I can hit divide. And now there's actually a space. It's actually transparent space there now. Because if you put it over star, you'll see it's going behind. So this is no longer white. It's actually the color of the pasteboard. Right? So if this object here was, light blue, I would have put this over here, right? So you would have a light blue background. So that divide comes really in handy. Let's go back. I'm just going undo until I get all the way back. So I'm going to leave my G up here, and I'll show you what will happen if I were to put these two elements on top of each other. Right? It merges. So this will also divide, but it'll divide it in a different way. Let's use these two and show you what happens if I hold these two objects down and then divide. Actually, I did divide right. So it was so it kind of gives you that kind of crisscross pattern. Sorry, I was on this third one. It's the fourth Pathfinder tool. Will give you that crisscross pattern. So if I have these two elements next to each other, I can also select by dragging and clicking both elements. So you kind of get that ugly crisscross pattern, which is probably not the best design choice, but just to show you what the tool can actually do. So here we'll use another Pathfinder tool. So I'm selecting these two elements, and I'm going to go to this Pathfinder, and they're one object, but they're not. It didn't take the color of the two objects. It's kind of, it's almost like it just grouped it without actually removing and making the color all one. Whereas the first one, it all became red. It all became one dominant color. So I'm going to go back. I have my two elements. So this next one is also going to keep the shape, but not make them all. They're all grouped as one shape, but they're not. It didn't take the color of the yellow or the red. So this divide tool here, let me go back. I'm undoing until I can get them back to two separate objects. Okay, so I'm selecting both objects. This divide tool, sorry, wrong one. Alright, so it takes the crisscross pattern on the inside of the curve and just keeps the inside of the star. Okay, selecting this again, two objects. And now you have an outline. It's a very faint outline of both elements in there. And then you can still manipulate these lines by clicking on the line, and changing the stroke of that line and making it thicker. So I can make it a 4-point stroke. All right, and I can make this, a 4-point stroke. All right, so there's a lot of things you can do, kind of playing around with the Pathfinder tool, and grouping elements together and making them one compound shape. And when we start doing logos, I'll talk a little bit about the logos this week, as well as I'll talk about next week. Using shapes to kind of create interesting icons. So it's really a good tool to learn. It's the Pathfinder tool. I'm going to delete these. Also, you can join paths. So show a little bit about this last week. So if you have a path, let's say I'll use the pen tool. Sorry, it's this one. Let's say I have a pen tool and I have a path. I'm just clicking. And it's filled right now, so I'm going to make it outline. And then I have another path that's going to go in the opposite way. So let's say I want these two paths to join. So what I can do is I can click one edge, and you want to use a direct selection tool, because if you use a selection tool, everything is going to select. So with the direct selection tool, you'll notice that when you click on it, it becomes solid. Whereas if I just click over here, it's just white. It's hard to kind of see. But that's what it is when it's not selected. And you can click on it and it becomes solid. Hold the shift key down, click on the other one, that becomes solid. And then you can go to the object, path, join, and it'll automatically join the two paths for you. So if I wanted to join this path, I can select, I'm holding on the shift key and clicking on the other edge, so the two ends that you want to join, and then go to Apple J, which is join. So sometimes you have an element that you want to join, not that's maybe you drew it with a pen tool but it wasn't perfect. You can use the join tool to then join the two elements together. One thing I want to point out is really important is sometimes when you have elements in Illustrator and you click it and you sort of double click it really quickly, it goes into a different layer, right? It goes into a group. So each of these layers, and if you look on the layer panel, right, panels are starting to get kind of crazy here. If you look at the layers panel, you'll notice that the layers can actually go into further layers. So each of these elements is broken up into separate layers. You probably want to stay on the top one, but just so that you know that it's all a grouped element, these all are different paths. So when you can just go back to the left arrow to get back to the top level. So sometimes you just might mistakenly double click something and be inside of a path, and understand that this is a grouped element and you want to go back. Right, that's so as you click it, you see the layers panel is moving, and you go all the way out to the top layer. So just don't be alarmed if you click something, and then you end up here. Just go back with the arrows and make back to the beginning. The last thing I'll touch on is masking. So sometimes we have an element. Let's say I have a square, and that square is red, and I want to make that square inside of, or I want to make a star that's orange, and I want to make that orange star inside. I'm going to change the color. I want to make that orange star fit inside of this square. So what you want to do is you want to send the star to the back. So go to Object, Arrange, Send to Back. Okay. And then you want to select the both elements. You can either drag and select like this. You get both elements together. And then you can go to the Object, Clip and Mask, Make. So Clip and Mask is like a crop tool almost. It'll take the shape that's in front, and that's your frame, and put the shape as of the back inside of it. So InDesign will be just like placed inside of a box. So then you can click on the box, and then you can change the color of that box. You can change the outline or the color. You can still select the inside object with the direct selection tool and change the color of it. I'm changing the line, not the fill. So I want the fill to be, that color or that color, right? And you can change the outline to be none. So it's a really cool way to, and you still have control over what's inside of that box. Right, so you can control the paths by using the crop tool, which is a masking tool in Illustrator, to take one element and put it into another. Hope this helps. That's tutorial number 2 for week 2. Bye.